I've had loads of conversations over the past couple of years with friends, professional connections and clients who tell me they're not ready to conventionally retire. And I get it. The conventional view of retirement involving just fun but no purpose doesn't feel enough for many of the people I speak to. And they're looking for something a little bit different to include in the mix as a life well lived. But what if I told you that all we need to do is reframe retirement in a way that suits us? If we choose to intentionally design our lives in a way that doesn't concern itself with the conventional norms, but instead looks at our next chapter and building it in a way that actually feels compelling to us, we might feel differently about the word retirement and able to make changes in our lives which make us healthier, happier, and improve our overall well-being. So in this video, I'll share ideas from our previous videos I think you'll benefit from watching from if you're at an age where retirement's on the horizon, but you're thinking, definitely not for me. Welcome to What Happens Next. Okay, change is hard. And it's why many of us defer retirement when we could potentially make positive change in our lives. We stick with the status quo because it feels safer. However, I believe that if we're navigating change, it's useful to have a framework, a perspective, and some tools so that we can navigate change successfully. So in this first video, I want to share with you some really useful tools, including the change curve model, why we should avoid the retirement cliff and instead go for the retirement flight path, and why there's likely to be some negative emotion temporarily with any change. We're going to finish by sharing 4 practical tips you can use to make change easier. Roll the tape. If you've spent decades becoming competent, your knowledge and skills useful to other people, and finding purpose through being useful, it's often jarring when, slowly but surely, that old script doesn't fit you anymore. You feel like something has to change. And there's a quiet friction that goes on often in our 50s and 60s where we're thinking about change, but we don't know how to get there. Because let's face it, change is difficult. Because from the outside, people say, you've got a great life. But inside, the emotions that are going on are often tough to navigate. The good news is psychology gives us a helpful lens, and that's called the change curve. It was designed by a psychologist called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross many years ago, originally to help people cope with grief, but actually is a great tool to help us think about how we navigate change in our life. In plain English, it talks about the fact that major life transitions have an emotional shape, and all of us go through these emotions in a different speed, different pace, and with different intensity. But often change happens like this. We tend to start with shock and denial. We go through frustration and the messy middle of where we're working out what our next chapter is. Then we get into experimenting with that next chapter, making a decision, and finally settling into the next chapter of our lives. The reality is, for the majority of us, the transition into the next chapter of your life isn't smooth. It's messy, like any fundamental life change is. However, by recognising the fact that we all go through this change in a messy way, and we've got to do it whilst handling the complex emotions as we navigate this, it might allow us to understand that these emotions aren't things we should feel bad about. We should actually appreciate they're just part of the process. Now, if you've followed What Happens Next for a while, you'll be aware of Mike's story. After 3 decades in a senior engineering role, Mike came to us to do the numbers with him to work out whether he had enough financially. Then he made the ultimate decision, and we wouldn't recommend you do it like Mike did, by the way. Actually, we talk about often on What Happens Next, thinking about transition into the next stage of your life more as a flight path than a cliff. But Mike decided that after doing his job for a number of decades, it's definitely had enough. Now, the reason we recommend a flight path, not a cliff, is because of the text that I got from Mike on the 3rd of Jan, 2 years ago, that said, Mr. Daems, is this what retirement looks like? Do I need to get out more, or do I need to get a life? Now, when Mike sent me that text, and I asked him to come in and just help me understand a bit more about what he was going through, his first reaction was that he was bored. But actually, when we go a bit deeper, there was a range of emotions going on that fit in with what Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talks about when she thinks about change. There's the shock of all this time when you've had so much structure in your life. There's the frustration of being a smart, motivated individual and not being able to work out immediately what this next chapter looks like. There's the denial that you'll work it out, and then the realisation that actually it takes a bit more time to navigate this change. And then there's that movement into trying new stuff, making choices, and integrating your new life into how you actually want to spend your time. In my 2 decades as a chartered financial planner, I've seen this change happen with my clients as they go into the next chapter of their lives many, many times. It's never the same because we're all different, but often there's similar themes, and the theme is change is a lot tougher than most people think. You see, many of us plan the financial leap well, but the emotional landscape, including the identity shift, the loss of structure, the need to still have meaning in our lives, is something I believe we don't focus prominently enough on. And I know Mike's not alone, because the amount of conversations I've had over the last 18 months on what happens next with our guests, but also informally when I'm talking about what happens next, is that people design for the money, think about the money, but don't think about the other elements their life's going to look like in the next chapter of their lives. So that's why I believe it's important to think about how we navigate change in our lives and being able to understand that this is emotionally complex. And in this video, because I don't want it to all be theory, I want there to be some practical things you can do. I'm going to talk about 4 things you can do today to better plan and prepare for that next chapter. I believe the first step, and this is my number 1, is awareness. So take a look at the research done by Dr. Kubler-Ross, particularly the change curve. Because what that gives you is a framework, it gives you a map to run on, and it gives you a realisation that actually change is difficult, and the emotions you're going through as you navigate this change aren't unique. Many people go through this change and navigate those emotions. Often when we're going through our own retirement or what happens next journey, it feels like we're alone. But understanding that actually change is difficult, and let's face it, retirement or whatever happens next is probably going to be one of the biggest changes in our lives. Realising we're not alone, and everybody goes through these emotions in varying degrees and in varying strengths, but goes through these emotions is really important, because change, particularly when it comes to our identity shifting, and that happens a lot when we leave work and go into the next chapter of our lives, the discomfort we feel in that change is entirely natural. After all, we've told ourselves stories about our identity for decades. When it no longer fits with our lives, that's not going to be a smooth or natural process. But here's the reality. Every major life transition includes a period where our old identity slowly unravels and morphs into a new one. William Bridges, in his brilliant book Transition, calls this the neutral zone. I call it the messy middle, and it's that strange in-between place where one chapter has ended, but the next one hasn't quite started. However, appreciating this fundamental change in our lives is emotionally turbulent to varying degrees and with varying emotions for everybody means you're not alone and might make that change a little bit easier. Tip number 2 is plan and prepare for what happens next with plenty of time to spare. Recently, I interviewed the brilliant Beck Wilson, author of Prime Time, and she provided unique insight into how change occurs in our 50s and 60s and how one way we can make the transition from our life now to the life we want in a smooth way is just give us more road to run on, make sure we're planning and preparing for it earlier. Because in our conversation, she described how so few people plan for that pre-retirement bit and actually, instead of having that flight path, fall off a cliff when the time to stop their career that they've had for a number of decades comes. Rebecca calls the decade before we plan this fundamental change as our lifestyling phase. It's a window where the kids are probably grown up, the mortgage is easing off or gone, and we both have time and money to redesign our life in a way that works for us. The challenge we face is most people wait until retirement happens to them, rather than shaping it both gradually and intentionally. And according to Beck's research, only 31% of people retire with choice, by choice. The rest wait until retirement happens to them. I'd like you to think about that because I want you to make sure that you're one of the people who start planning now and retire with plenty of choice. I completely agree with Beck's insights that planning with plenty of time to spare is a step practically we can take to make sure that the transition into the next chapter is as smooth as possible. Being intentional about not only the money side, but how you want to spend your time and potentially making the change gradually and incrementally is a step practically that you can take today. So don't fall off the retirement cliff and let retirement happen to you. Create and design a flight path which allows you to ease into the next chapter of your life on your terms. As I record this, we haven't released Beck's interview yet. If you want to be the first person to know when we release it, but also get access to all of the new insights on what happens next as soon as they come out, there's 2 really easy ways to do this. Firstly, you can subscribe to this channel, and you can do that by pressing the bell and pressing the subscribe button. We'd really appreciate you doing that. Or you can join the What Happens Next Inner Circle for free simply by clicking this QR code or clicking the link in the comments below, in the notes below, to take you straight to the page designed to make sure that as soon as we get really fresh content coming out, you're going to be one of the first people to know. The third practical thing you can do is speak to somebody who's recently gone through the journey of changing their lives into the next chapter and learn from their experience. One of the things I've been really fortunate to do on What Happens Next is interview a bunch of people who have recently retired or navigated into the next chapter of their lives about the challenges and experiences in that chapter. I definitely recommend you check out 2 interviews in particular, and we'll put all the links in the comments in the notes below. Certainly the interview with Damien Stankham is a must watch. There's loads of insight about planning and preparing, particularly the tip he talks about in terms of 60 paydays before starting to prepare for the next chapter, but also the interview with Tim Levy, who shared real useful insights. From chatting to people, I've learned 2 things. Firstly, the journey isn't always a bed of roses. It comes with unique challenges we could just simply do better with by being more aware of. And secondly, I think there's loads to learn just by having a conversation with people who have gone through that transition. So the practical thing you can do is ask somebody about that transition and learn from that experience. I'd suggest you want to ask the questions about what's good, but also what's challenging. Then you can better plan and navigate the next chapter of your life with insights from somebody who's experienced those changes. My last practical tip on this video is to think about running micro experiments in your own life. Micro experiments are just small incremental ways you can try stuff out. That might mean starting to reduce your work hours. Take Friday afternoons off work, for example. It might mean experimenting with a hobby you'd like to spend more time doing. You've always wanted to try it, but you never had the time. It might mean trying out volunteering or pottery, or looking to set up a micro business when you've got a bit more time in your hands. The reality is that if we try these experiments on how we might spend our most valuable commodity, which actually is time, not money, then we can make sure the time we need to fill in the next chapter of our lives is a little less scary to feel. Let me be clear, change is tough for all of us. However, appreciating that change is difficult, and it's likely you're going to go through a range of emotions as you transition into the next chapter. Knowing that is the starting point to helping you plan. Step one is appreciate that these negative emotions are entirely normal, and everybody who's navigating significant change in their lives goes through them. Step two is to plan and prepare with plenty of time to spare, so retirement doesn't simply happen to you, but you get to plan it intentionally. Step three is to speak to people about the challenges they've faced as they're going through the journey into the next chapter of their lives. And step four is to try some stuff out. Rapid, low-cost experiments so you can work out what the next chapter of your life, activity-wise, is going to be filled with. In this next video, I want to talk about one of the most powerful tools you can use to design your life in the next chapter, and that is experimentation, specifically low-cost, rapid experimentation. So, in this video, let's explore why experimentation is better than having the perfect plan, how to test out things in a low-risk way, and in it we share loads of practical examples of how you design the next chapter of your life using experiments. Roll the tape. I reckon you should live the next chapter of your lives in whatever way you want. But here's the challenge. My version of the next chapter of my life is probably going to be different to yours, and your neighbours, and your friends. We've all read the blogs and watched the videos, and we're still not sure about what retirement looks like for us. And I get it. For 20 years, I've been speaking to clients like you about what the ideal next chapter looks like. And here's the thing. Even though there's always similarities in terms of the things that you might want to do, they are always different, because that next chapter is likely to be, number one, a work in progress, and number two, unique. However, I believe there's one concept that we all need to know to make sure the next chapter of our lives is the best one for us. It's one we talk about quite a lot on this channel and in the podcasts we do and the videos, but it's such an under-discussed thing. And that's the concept of rapid, low-cost experimentation. Now, I first read about this concept in a brilliant book called Design Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. If you haven't watched the TED Talk by Bill Burnett, where he talks about this, we'll put a link below so that you've got access to that immediately. Rapid, low-cost experimentation is exactly what it sounds like. It's exactly what it says in the tin. It's about testing small ideas in your life quickly and cheaply before you commit to them fully. It's like dipping your toe in the water before you decide whether to dive all the way in. And the empowering reality that nobody talks about is actually you don't need clarity and a full plan for the next 10 years, 15 years of your life. All you need to do is take the next incremental step to work out and get a bit closer to the life you want to lead in the next chapter. However, you need to be willing to do one thing, and that's experiment. That's the secret. You need to try new things to see whether they're going to fit into the long-term plan you've got for the next 5 to 10 years of your life. If you're willing to experiment, the game of planning out your best next chapter changes fundamentally. The thing is, I want to share with you some really practical ways of using the concepts of low-cost experimentation that I've shared with my clients and I've applied in my own life, so you can understand how this principle actually works in practice, particularly when you're considering your retirement or whatever you choose to do next. Here's number one: experimenting with purpose and meaning. One of the most common big questions I hear from clients is this: how do I find purpose when I retire? Often purpose when we're working is baked into the work. Either the work has purpose or the purpose comes from the money we earn and the ability to provide for our families that comes from the work. And the beauty of not finding purpose immediately, but just trying stuff and getting closer to what you believe your purpose is you don't have to figure out that grand mission statement for the remainder of your life before you even start. You can just try small, meaningful actions and see what activities you get involved with really light you up. Maybe you're curious about mentoring young people. Instead of setting up a big formal program and mentoring on a grand scale, just volunteer for a couple of hours at a local school or college or mentoring organisation simply to see how it feels. Maybe you think you'd like to share your knowledge, wisdom and expertise by writing a book. Don't start with a 300-page manuscript. Start with a blog post, write a short essay, or even a single story shared with friends or somebody you might want to influence positively. You might even choose to start a YouTube channel and post a couple of videos to see how that feels. Maybe you've always thought about contributing more to a charity. Don't commit to being on the board of trustees straight away. Help out a bit and see whether it fits. That might start with one event, and you'll quickly notice whether the cause that you're working for energizes you or drains you. The trick here is to keep the stakes low and the pace quick, so that you can learn from those experiments and work out where purpose is going to come from in the next chapter of your life. I think the question to ask yourself in this regard is, what's the smallest thing I can do in the next couple of weeks to work out where my purpose might sit in the next chapter of your life? The second thing I want to talk about is relationships and community, and how you can use low-cost experimentation to get closer to the friendships you deserve. Because here's the reality most people don't prepare for in retirement. When you step away from work, typically the relationships you've got change. You lose touch with the relationships you've got with work, and you don't need to. You can maintain those relationships. But naturally, if people are still at work and you're not there anymore, the dynamic of that relationship changes. And if you're not careful, that can leave you particularly isolated. But just as you can experiment with purpose, you can also experiment with building new connections. Now, you don't need to decide up front what community and friendships are going to look like for you, but you want to test out different environments to see what actually fits. Maybe you're curious about joining a walking group. You haven't got to join straight away, but often you can just go on one group to see if the dynamic works for you. I wouldn't overthink it. I just go, see what the vibe's like, see if it works for you, and then you can decide incrementally whether you want to continue to go or go again. Maybe you've always wanted to sing in a choir. Instead of committing to a full concert season, try a taster session or join a one-off workshop to see whether that's going to work for you. Maybe you want to meet people outside of your usual social circle. That might start with trying a course at your local community college, a book club at the library, or something as simple as a meetup for people with shared interests. And don't underestimate the connection you can make on digital communities too. Online groups can be an incredible way to find people who share your passions, whether that's photography, gardening, writing, or even learning a new skill like coding, podcasting, or increasingly AI. Again, the power of experimentation is that nothing has to be permanent when it comes to building friendships or building communities. You can try different groups, see what works for you, and build those social connections. However, all of the research, and in particular, the book that I definitely recommend you read on this particular subject is one by Dr. Robert Waldinger called The Good Life. Do not underestimate the power of social connection on our happiness and well-being. As Dr. Waldinger writes in The Good Life, the thing that really defines our life more than anything else positively is the relationships, and the quality of our relationships positively defines, if the relationships are positive, the quality of our lives. Again, the power of experimentation means that nothing needs to be permanent. You can try one group, and if it doesn't click with you, no, I'm done. You can move on to the next. You can try different things until you find the people you really want to spend more time with. And the more experiments you run, the more you expand your network of connections and opportunities to belong. Now, we've created a couple of useful resources to help you with these experimentations that I'd like to share with you. First, everything we're talking about today is going to be the What Happens Next book. That book is going to be out early in 2026, and it's going to be full of stories, tools, and strategies similar to low-cost experimentation that's going to help you move into the next chapter of your life with clarity and confidence. You can find a link below in the description section. Simply click that, join the waiting list, and you'll be one of the first people to find out when the book comes out. Or alternatively, there's a QR code just below that if you're watching this on a screen, you've got your phone in hand, you can click and it will take you straight to the page where you can sign up. Or if you want something you can use straight away, you can take the What Happens Next quiz. It takes about 10 minutes to do, so it's a real low-cost experimentation. And in just a few minutes, it highlights the areas of your well-being that are really strong, but also the ones you might want to improve. Think of it as a personalised starting point for experimentation, because that's what it is. It allows you to work out the areas that might need a little bit more work in terms of well-being. You can take the quiz for free, again, using the link in the description below, or you can click that QR code there. I really hope that's useful. And without further ado, let's move on to small experiment number 3. That's experimenting with the rhythm, the daily rhythm, as you leave your current occupational role and how your lifestyle looks in the next chapter. This is, I believe, one of the most underestimated elements of retirement. When you've been either working for yourself or working for somebody else for the last 30 to 40 years, often your daily rhythm has been dictated by work. Work gives our days structure, deadlines and routines. And when that disappears, it can be liberating, but it can also be disorientating. I've had clients tell me, I thought I'd have all the time in the world, but now I don't even know what day it is, and I can feel a bit restless. That's where low-cost experimentation can be a game changer. Because instead of assuming you'll naturally fall into the perfect daily rhythm, treat your days like experiments. I tried different versions of a retirement day, retirement week, or retirement month, and see what feels good. One week you might have a slow morning routine. I might read the paper, a long coffee and a bit of exercise. The next week you might try structuring your mornings around focus projects. That might include writing, learning or working on a hobby, and leaving the afternoons free. Thinking about structure as an experiment allows you to incrementally get to a point where you go, how much time do I need to really relax and enjoy this chapter of my life? And how much time do I really want to work on projects that I really believe in? All of this is a test drive, right? It's about working out what way the day works for you, so it works for you best. And here's the secret. The rhythm that works for you today might not be the same one in 1, 2, 5 and 10 years. So carry on experimenting, carry on thinking about that time you've got and what the ideal balance or mix might be for you. It's about recognizing that often if we don't actively plan how we're going to spend that time, we lose track. But thinking about our time as an experiment and how we might spend it might give us a bit more of an insight into how we build the best next chapter possible. Number 4, experimenting with work, money, and contribution. Now, this is a big one because for many people, the idea of retirement used to mean stopping work entirely. The more and more conversations I'm having with people I know and clients, people in their 50s and 60s and sometimes 70s are saying, I don't actually want to stop working. I just want to do the work that I love with the freedom and flexibility to do it when I want. Maybe that looks like consulting a few days a month or a week instead of full time. Maybe it's a side project or a hobby turning into an income. Maybe it's non-paid work like volunteering and using your professional skills to benefit causes you care about. The beauty of low-cost, rapid experimentation is that you don't need to decide today. You can try it out. If you want to see how freelancing suits you, one small project so that you can see how that works for you. If you're thinking about teaching or mentoring, maybe running a one-off workshop is the way to go before you commit to something bigger. Curious about starting an online business? Don't build a website, all the business cards and spend months planning. Test your idea by offering it to a number of people in your community or network and see what happens. Also, maybe you don't quit the day job immediately. I call that falling off the retirement cliff because one day you're actively employed for quite a big chunk of your week and the next day you've got nothing in the diary. Maybe the best way to do it is a retirement flight path, which looks like spending 5 days a week if you're working 5 days at the moment working, with a gradual decline in the hours you're working instead of all or nothing. The point here is to ensure that you make decisions that allow you to do things gradually. Instead of stopping work immediately, the flight path allows you to try out what it's like to work a little bit less and have a reduced income to see whether it works for you. Now, if we zoom out to the bigger picture, here's the thing. You don't have to treat your next chapter like a giant unsolvable puzzle. You don't need the perfect plan. You just need to run loads of low-cost experiments. And when you do, a couple of really interesting things happen. You stop feeling stuck because you're making small incremental progress fairly regularly. You start learning what actually brings you joy and meaning instead of just guessing. And you build confidence because you realise that you don't have to have all the answers. You just need the momentum to continue to move forward. So if you're in your 50s and 60s and looking at a scary blank canvas for the next chapter of your life and going, what do I fill that with? Remember this. Your next chapter doesn't actually have to arrive fully formed. You can design it by gradually experimenting. That's the empowering reality nobody talks about, and it's available to you right now. So what is that first natural next step you're going to take to make sure that you're moving from the life you've got now to the life you truly want to live? If you're not planning to retire, but thinking about making positive change, I want to get practical in this next video. So I think about and highlight in this video 5 specific techniques to reframe retirement in a way that's going to work for you. That includes self-reflection, finding an accountability partner, joining communities, and many more. Like all of our videos, I've tried to make this really practical so you can take away some ideas to design the life you want in your next chapter. Roll the tape. Now, I just finished writing the What Happens Next book. Feel free to click on the comments below if you want to join the waiting list. It's going to be out early in 2026. And finishing this project actually, has made me realise something really important. Nobody does anything of consequence on their own, because Even though written the book, I've written every word of the book, I've had bucket loads of support, loads of accountability, and I've had people through the interviews we've been doing for over 18 months now and what happens next, providing me with consistently good and interesting ideas and asking insightful questions. So I definitely haven't done it alone. I'm not a fan of this self-made man fallacy, a story we often tell ourselves which paints a picture of our lives as entirely dependent on what you've done. And the reality is, if we really looked at our lives, we'd be always reliant on other people. Now, the reason I'm not a fan of that fallacy is because clearly personal effort and knowledge are involved in what we've done in our lives. We cannot do it alone. We need other people around us. And when it comes to the journey to the next chapter of our lives, be that retirement or what happens next, the same principle applies. We sometimes need frameworks, habits, and also people to help keep us accountable to what we choose to do ourselves. So without further ado, here's the 5 things I reckon you should consider when thinking about what happens next to keep you accountable to the life you're saying you want to live. The first one is simple. It's self-reflection. It's likely in the next chapter of your life, you're going to be trying loads of new things out. However, instead of just keeping busy trying loads of new things out, how do you decide what ones are actually working for you and you want to fit into the new life you want to build and what ones aren't? At the end of the last century, Graham Gibbs created a model I believe might be useful to be aware of when you're thinking about whether something is the right fit for your new life or we can actually bin it, we can get rid of it. First of all, you try a new experience, you try something that you might think you enjoy that fits into the next chapter of your life, and then spend some time reflecting on that experience. And that goes in the following order. Firstly, you talk about what happened. You may write this down and self-reflect or think about it. How did it make you feel? Was it a fun, uplifting experience, or did you feel differently? Was the experience both positive and challenging? Evaluate what it brings to your life in this next chapter. What happened and why did things turn out how they did? But also, if you didn't enjoy it, what can you learn from it? And what you're going to do different next time. And then the practical action you're going to take on this self-reflection. That might mean trying something new and going back and doing it again, and that fitting into the next chapter model of your life. That also might mean avoiding things like that every time in the future. However, every experiment, every experience in the next chapter of your life is a useful one because it gives you data that you can learn from and then take action from. Now, you can use this reflective model in a bunch of different ways, from trying a new sport or hobby to seeing what kind of work might work for you if you choose to do that in the next chapter of your life, all the way from spending time with friends and choosing to get involved in communities and causes you believe in. The good news is we can all self-reflect. However, it does mean that we might want to create some space and time in our day so that we can get into that habit of self-reflection. And this next tip might help you have a more formalised process to help you reflect in a better way. And that's journaling. Journaling, the act of simply writing down your thoughts, feelings, ideas and reflections, either prompted by some questions or free-flowing, turns all of those random ideas in your head into something with a bit more clarity. Now, personally, I find writing a really cathartic experience, but also an experience where I get to clarify what I actually think and believe about the world. I'd recommend journaling or writing on a regular basis, and I use prompts when I journal and write, but also rereading past entries to see how you felt at a particular point in time and what you can learn from that experience. Now, the good news is we are building our own What Happens Next journal. It's going to be part of the package that you can get access to when we launch the premium What Happens Next community early in 2026. There's a waiting list that you can join. It's in the comments below. But if you'd like to, and you're watching this on not on your phone, you've got your phone to hand, simply point your phone at that QR code below, and it will take you to a page where you can be one of the first people to find out about the What Happens Next community and get either your digital or leather-bound journal as soon as it's released. However, sometimes self-reflection and journaling isn't enough. That's why tip number 3 is really important. And that's consider an accountability partner. Now, accountability partner is a person, friend, family member, peer with whom you share goals with and check in regularly. And like a coach, this relationship is friend to friend. It's probably less formal than a relationship with a coach. And it's really designed for mutual encouragement and accountability. Having somebody on your side as a reminder and somebody to hold you to account, as well as having a lot of fun and having a great relationship on the way, might be really useful. But here's some tips for picking a decent accountability partner. Pick someone you trust who wants the best for you. Not somebody who's going to complain and moan, but also shoot down the ideas that you want to try. Set a regular time to chat and schedule where it's going to be, because that regular check-in means that you're going to arrive more likely with some of these experiments about what happens next completed. If it's going to be a call, a walk, a coffee, or a digital check-in, that's fine, but schedule it in advance. And then as the relationship develops and you're chatting about different stuff, adjust what you need. But you do want to ask that accountability partner to actually keep you accountable. And that's all about asking the questions that you might want or need when you're thinking about the next chapter of your life on the stuff you're telling them you want to do. However, if you don't feel comfortable having those sort of conversations informally with a friend, it might be, and this is my suggestion, worth thinking about some one-to-one coaching. One-to-one coaching often blends emotional and practical support from a trained coach. Professional coaches use frameworks to help you look at the stories you tell yourself about the world, ask challenging questions, and think through your own thoughts about a particular subject. A high-quality coach can provide useful frameworks to think about, either a particular challenge in the world. They can also keep you accountable, but they can also provide feedback. My experience is that a great coach will hold up a mirror to your world and help you ask the right questions, reflect, and make the right decisions for you. If I've been perfectly frank, the What Happens Next book wouldn't have been finished in the timescale that I wanted it to be without my brilliant coach, Ruth. And if you're watching this, thank you, Ruth. It's really appreciated. Because having that accountability, but also that fairly independent mirror on my actions and behaviours, has allowed me to really focus on what I want to achieve in this chapter of my life. However, if one-to-one coaching is out of your budget or it's not for you, here's a suggestion. Join a community group. Joining a community group of like-minded people who are going through the same opportunities and challenges you might be facing might give you the support you need. Being part of these communities allow you to share experiences, learn from each other, support each other, share ideas, and hopefully celebrate each other's wins. Now, we're going to be launching the What Happens Next community when we launch our services at the start of January 2026. And simply click the link below and join the waiting list to find out more when we do that. One of the other things that we're doing, this brand spanking new, and we're really excited about, is an AI coach, an artificial intelligence coach. Because actually, even though AI coaches in their current form don't replace the human coach experience or a community, getting support 24/7 when you need it and pointing to content that might be really useful for you for a challenge you're going through in that particular time is another way that technology has innovated to support you with your what happens next journey. So consider that as part of the mix, and we'll be talking a lot more about the AI coach throughout the year. So I hope those 3 videos are useful, but there's bucket loads more content on what happens next, this YouTube channel and on the website, that can help you work out the next chapter of your life. In this video, I share a practical blueprint to help you specifically design your life in a way that works for you. And in this video, I share why we should ignore the conventional model of learn, earn, and stop retirement and build a next chapter that's actually going to work for us. Hopefully that's useful. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you on the channel soon.